Hello, everyone. This is Fantastic Worlds. Welcome you back to Lovecraft Country and Control, Lore and Chill. Okay, so we're going to go over what the nail is. Now, I've referred to it a few times before, what's the connection to the board and former is, and of course the former's little side project, which is hidden in here, and what was going on between the board, Ash, Northmore, Marshall, Darling, and Jesse and the Hiss. This is a lot to go over. But the thing is about this area is we have to remember this entire thing is a stage set. There were no particular hieroglyphs about ancient caves and such that show that, people worshiping in a hero arising among the entities, which of course a giant bug. Because former is one of the board, aka the Watchers. This is the natural form of the Watchers now. They've been cursed with one-eyed bug things. Seems appropriate. Most High probably considers them to be vermin, but this is the device that's aggressive view over here. This is the device they use to create our world, or more accurately, to alter our world by cutting it off from the rest of the cosmic creation. It is a limiter, a power safety that prevents the rest of creation, except for the parts that the board wants, from filtering in. Now, the nail has been down here among the foundation. Now, when they say the foundation, by the way, what they mean is not this area we're in right now. They mean these large pillars here. Now, if you remember when we walked into the tree carving, Tree of Life, remember Cosmic Tree, this is the area we were dealing with. And when we walked into that particular zone, we walked into the nail's inner reality. Now, no seal is perfect. Entropy always leaks through. And the way entropy is leaked through in this manner is that it created it's called what I referred to before as chaotic terrain. In other words, the energy comes through without direction and immediately starts to form what is the closest approximation to, say, random field energy. It created these rocks, and the raw entropy then ground the rocks away and created this red sand. The sand, by the way, that is the same sort, if you recall, all the way back a few episodes. Probably about 5-6 episodes total. If you recall, in the main narrative, this red sand also appears around the Polaris section because that's the sand that Polaris themselves, who was in a giant pillar, if you recall that lore, was in. So what happens is these giant pillars are tuning forks. They're tuning forks of vibrational frequencies to do particular effects. Now, put it down, Jesse. These particular pillars back here are also probably the tuning forks of reality itself. Each one of these might represent an entire universe or set of universes within the cosmic void. If you were to enter them, you would go into those universes, but we can't because the nail blocks all access. In other words, they can't get in, we can't get out. We are prisoners of the board as it drains away our God force to supply themselves. Because once they have rebelled against the Most High, they no longer had access to the eternal source itself. They basically, that's what gives gods and angels and stuff their power. They literally get it from the Most High, passing God, stranger, whatever you want to call them, passing down through other entities as prisms to reflect light, and passing down and down further. But when you break away from that, when you fall, when you fade, you got nothing. You're basically an empty shell. Okay, you're a highly advanced entity that looks like a giant bug, but guess what? You can't shape reality anymore unless you do it through conduits, through objects, through machines, as it were, like, say, a human would have to do. Because a lot of times, and also say when humanity was made in their creator's image, they say that it's not actually God. We were created in the fallen's image, cut off from the divine, because that's what this text is. Remember, she said it, the level of radiation suppresses biological activity, but that's only what she can detect within the frequencies of the devices she has. It probably is also shutting down all of the cosmic energy that was within us. Remember, according to Gnosticism, we should have power. We should have a fraction of the God force that we inherit from being, from being an entity that descends at some length from God themselves. In other words, but what happened is that we got robbed of our inheritance by a bunch of really old and shitty seraphim. So, with that rambling out of the way, let's go take a look at the first thing that went wrong. Okay, so here we are back at the warehouse. Yes, I'm keeping the damn cat ears. He'll be going all the way through the Alan Wake experience, so you're just going to have to live with it. And let's go down to the basement. Now, if you recall, this particular section was secured. In other words, this was Ash's private lab in down there besides a few conference rooms that are more publicly accessible. I mean, you had to have 5 people's access card to get into this level, so obviously the basement lab. So obviously the whole thing was set up as secure for humans, but then there's a second level of security that we had to crack when we got down here. Yep. T's been around. Remember, T is down here. There's already been a ooh, we actually got to go over this too. There's actually been verification that he appeared here first before the oldest house, because he would have had to pass through the Foundation to get the oldest house from the rest of the universe. He had to descend. Remember, that avatar was within the field the nail produces, so yeah, that avatar in the Masked High has most of their energy blocked, which is why he's just kind of, this guy who says and does things a little bit, manipulates things a little on the sly. Doesn't have his full powers, but by God, if you ever bet against, God, you're going to lose. Anyways, these display cases I didn't mention before because we blew the hell out of them during the fight where we were down here. But yeah, they are chunks of the astral rock, which means that the bleed we've been worrying about is not a recent phenomenon. These blocks were put in here in the 60s, because remember, the Foundation was lost after the board demanded that Northmore remove all board personnel. But we'll get into that in a moment. Let's go over the first thing that's gone. That started going wrong in the board's plans. See, the board's former communicated with Ash in the 1960s, the very beginning. And you can actually hear it, can't you? You can hear the sort of dissonance vibration. I'll be quiet for a moment. Let me boost up the volume. Now, if you listen carefully, yep, you can hear completely different resonance in the background music and these giant eyes. Now, peacock feather-like eyes, by the way, are ancient symbols for the Seraphim, which, of course, lead into the fact that the board are fallen Seraphim, the aka the Watchers, from the Book of Enoch. So which means that Former is being cast out of the group. Now, my guess is that Former was cast out for a reason we can't comprehend. It could have been falling out. I mean, it obviously wasn't a moral reason, or, Ati would be working with Former to, take him back, because, redemption is a path. It's a thing that happens. But in this case, what's going on is that he's decided he's playing his own game, because he partnered with Ash, because we saw the notes over here that Emily translated, in an attempt to create his own nail. Now, we don't know how effective this nail is. It doesn't seem to be complete either. The question is, how did Ash create it? Easy peasy. He did it out of the bits of the astral rock that were collected in the 1960s. In fact, this is probably the building Michaud was using for, and what happened is when Northmore pulled all his people out, it was just down to him. And not forget that when he started doing this, the egos, as he puts them, the golems that are under control of the board and Former, because Former can take temporary control over them as he did in the final battle, those golems were the original servants of the board. They were created to do things here, within the Foundation, but they can't survive outside the Foundation's particular energies. They can't go up to the oldest house, or we've seen them there. That's why they need humans. They need humans to interact and work within all the layers beyond the Foundation, the oldest house, and of course the world itself out there, which is why the Bureau of Control works so well for them. It does all their little dirty work, and they think they're the good guys. Except now Jesse is more than onto them after the events of the Foundation. But yeah, the egos are originally set up to provide them assistance, and when Ash started building this nail, because he said, I don't understand why they turned against us, except that's the reason. Hey, let me turn down the background, just in case. Right then, just in case. You don't have to hear me, you don't have to worry about trying to lose me and all this. But yeah, Ash started working against the board by creating the nail, this second nail. Now, why is that the case? Because if the second nail was completed, and I'm not sure it is, then what happens is if the first nail was destroyed, then this would become the dominant force and create a much smaller universe of Former's design. In other words, Former would have his own little microverse, much smaller than our world, mind you. I don't know, maybe a few miles in diameter, maybe the equivalent of Manhattan, maybe the equivalent of Australia. Who knows how big the area would be, but that would be under his solitary control, and that has been his plan. He wants to run any agent possible, including Jesse, which is why he assisted Jesse, in an attempt to destroy the original nail. Which brings us to Marshall. Okay, so, yeah, Marshall. Now, remember when I kind of lost my... Oh, there we go. kind of lost it on Marshall for going cowboy a few times back. That's because Marshall wasn't thinking rationally. Marshall was attempting. All right, let's get back to the entrance. Marshall was attempting to go solo by themselves in an extremely dangerous situation that they had no understanding of, in order to fulfill an objective that she had no idea would actually work. Does that sound rational to you? Does that sound like a veteran would do? Except it would sound intelligent if the person was under the control of another entity. Keyboard's messing up. It's lucky I'm not into straight combat. Oh, wait. Look what happened. Let's get out of here. Alright, we're gone. And fast travel just doesn't freeze, by the way. Okay, so as I was saying, when it comes to Marshall, what happened with Marshall, let's get that F from floating. Marshall was a pawn of Former. That's how it essentially comes down. Remember, she doesn't trust Trench, who's essentially controlled under by the board. It's sort of eat into his mind, just as Ash didn't trust Northmore. Now, there's perfectly good reason not to trust Northmore. He was power-mad lunatic. Oh, go away. He was a power-mad lunatic, but Trench was compromised by the Hiss, but it took a long while for them to actually get him to do that, to take full control. And he did have some vestige of morality. I mean, he seemed to understand what the Bureau was doing was wrong, but he didn't see any other way of doing anything. But Marshall was completely against Trench. In other words, remember, Marshall found a way to come down here. That's impossible to do conventional. You can't actually, there is no access points between the oldest house and the oldest house and the Foundation. There is no physical way for a body to access it. You require the board's assistant. Now, the board was not going to work with Marshall. Marshall hated the board, just as Ash did, because both Ash and Marshall absorbed so much of Former's energies, his vibration, that they became influenced by Former more than the board, because the board himself, remembers, created this sort of sociopathic indifference to human life and suffering within the board, within the Bureau itself, all the personnel. Now that, of course, they're attuned to Polaris, they'll start aligning with Polaris's objectives to stabilize the world and eventually reopen it to the rest of creation, as per, God's evil plan, as I detailed previously in the series. So, by that point, we know that Former is trying to play every part against each other, and he thinks he's a lot smarter than he is, because his idea is to destroy the nail. So what he did is, first of all, in the 1960s, he got Ash, by essentially working and talking with him for so long that it absorbed enough of Ash absorbed enough of Former's vibrations that he became amenable to assisting him and, helping, say, his hatred against Northmore and the board by offering a perfectly logical extension. Former probably presented himself as someone who'd split from the board for moral reasons, and then, because remember, they talked, which means that, like with Jessie, you attune enough to the entity, you can hear it. She's attuned to the board, she can hear it. Former's trying to attune to Jessie. However, both of them don't realize that Polaris has already taken Jessie, so therefore there's no way to attune to Jessie stronger than Polaris themselves, so she's doing Polaris's objectives, which by extension is Ati/God's intentions. Anyways, so by that explanation, we now have, of course, a situation in which this first nail was created by Ash in the 1960s, and during the Hiss crisis, sometime before the Hiss crisis, Former spoke with Marshall, because Marshall came to this position Foundation multiple times. That requires a member of the board to send you, because that's how they got Jessie here. However, Polaris got Emily and the rest of the units there themselves. Remember, Jessie thought about it. It went to the Polaris hive mind. Polaris's hive mind told Emily to come down here with a staff, and teleports them back and forth between space and time, as she's also still in the boardroom. But then I'm guessing linear time is not really a thing Polaris has to worry about. In any case, what happens is that Former basically aligned with Marshall, stoked her paranoia, brought her down here during the crisis, and told her to destroy the nail. And Marshall thought it was a great idea. You listened to her on the hotline. Now, how did she access the hotline? Because she was neither dead nor fully infected by the Hiss by that point. Simple as pie. You need access to the board to access... the board is aligned with the hotline. So therefore, that's how Trench, aligned with the board, can speak to us through the hotline after his death, because essentially that's a resonant echo. Marshall's aligned with Former. Former is a member of the board. Therefore, Former can attune with the phone. Now, why did Former attune Marshall to the phone to contact Jessie? Well, first of all, to get Jessie down here, under the impression that perhaps he wants, remember, there's three players here. He wants Jesse and the board against each other. And he thought this would be the best way to do it because Marshall's attempt to destroy the nail created more problems than it really did. Now, obviously, there already was astral leakage, otherwise, we wouldn't have the astral stone to create the original, secondary nail, which means that the leakage must have started in the 1960s at a very small rate, which is why it took so long for Ash to build the partial nail that we saw in the basement. So let's continue with that concept. That means when Marshall blew up the nail, the astral rent started to appear. Now, my guess is because Former's nail is not completed, what happened is that Former realized that he didn't have what he needed. He needed that nail to be repaired. So Former assisted Jesse in repairing the nail because he realized that the total breakdown of the world would not be what he wants. Obviously, he wants a chunk of the world for himself. Whether or not any of the rest of the world exists, he doesn't care. He just wants his little section, his little godhood, maybe a few thousand people to rule over as a not so benevolent entity. And I guess that's really as far as his imagination will actually go. So what happens then is Former brought down Jesse to fix his mess. I'm going to use he because Seraphim are technically defined as he in literature. So even though they should transcend gender. And yeah, so that's kind of where all this went. So this is going to be probably a really short episode, but again, it's a DLC, not a full one. But yeah, now...
Isn't my favorite director.
Oh, hi, Pope. I love you too. Yeah, they some people have been trying to ship these two, and I don't think it's that. I think also workplace romance isn't appropriate anyways. We don't even know which way Jesse swings. But yeah, so, and all of this is happening while the Most High and their agents are still trying to break through this barrier to get to humanity, to, well, here's the question. Are they trying to rescue us, or they just want the world back? I mean, a friend of mine pointed out that life and death are just states of being to higher entities. We die, we just go somewhere else, but we're still there as far as the entity is concerned, whether or not we're in the Sunlit Realms, the underworld, or wherever else things happen. That's just kind of a tag on us. Still us, but we, of course, have a desire to keep living, usually. So we may not appreciate what our quote-unquote rescue might be from those entities out there. Now, we're probably going to have to continue working them with Jesse if this story ever does continue, or to try to bring down the nail and, of course, open up this world and humanity back to their divine potential. But the question is, what's the price going to be? What happens when we do so? And let me ask you a question, because this will feed into probably the last episode of Lore and Chill. Are there aspects of the Most High that aren't taking a gentle approach? Is there perhaps some entities out there who just want to rip apart the barrier, tear everything to pieces, destroy everyone and everything within it just to get it done? Because I'm fairly sure they could if they really wanted to, if they had some help from the inside. And maybe they've already tried. We'll go over that, like I said, in the next Lore and Chill episode. But until then, this is Fantastic World saying farewell from Lovecraft Country. And if you like this, like, share, subscribe. Of course, if you haven't checked the main series, why are you here? Go check out the main series. And if you are a subscriber, don't forget, we'll be coming up on the vote for the next series as Control is nearly done. All we have left is the Alan Wake experience, which probably I've heard is probably going to be 1 to 2 episodes plus the Lore and Chill. And if there is enough for a sidetrack down there, probably, but we'll see. But after that, we vote on the next series. And if you want to vote, become a subscriber. If you want extra votes, become a supporter, get additional material, and help unlock additional episodes. So I will see you next time. Bye.